And you're in
Small
LA,
talk.
right? Still in LA?
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. All right. I think we just went live here on Facebook. How's it going over there, Megan?
Hey, Benny. Benny, we're opening tomorrow at 25%. So it's very
Oh,
exciting over
wow.
here.
That
Yeah.
is exciting. Hopefully, we'll be able to follow suit shortly hereafter. But yeah, LA is still just outdoor only.
Outdoor
Is it?
drinking.
Yeah. Is it fall over there yet?
Uh, yeah, today it's like in the 70s. We always get, I'm sure you're familiar, the roller coaster, but it's definitely fall. Yeah. The sweaters are out,
Awesome.
the whiskey is out, so it's time.
Perfect timing. All right. Well, let's kick this off. So, hey everyone, just tuning in. Welcome. Thanks for taking some time out of your day for another episode of Portland Cocktail Week's Distance Learning. Partnered here with Campari Academy and some amazing folks from the industry around the country, bringing us fun, hot topics, interesting things that revolve around our industry, and sharing their tips and secrets with y'all. Today, we're joined by Meaghan Dorman in New York City. But before we get into her topic, which is menus, creating, curating, and adapting, of course, our sponsor today is Wild Turkey. So I thought, I'd talk about a product that maybe doesn't get as much shine. Everybody knows our classic Wild Turkey 101 straight bourbon. It's the original Wild Turkey product. It's been around longer than most of us have been alive. And it's got what I like to call like a younger sibling here in Wild Turkey straight bourbon. So this is 81 proof, a little more approachable in that regard if you don't, typically go for the higher proof bourbons. And this is a really versatile product, which definitely kind of plays into the topic today, which is menus, right? Like curating a bar program, if you will. So this 81 proof bourbon is really versatile. It can work as a well bourbon. It's a little more cost friendly. It makes a perfect mixed drink, but it also can work in classic cocktails still. So just something to keep in mind. We've got so many great different products out of Wild Turkey, and they all start with the same couple mash bills and process. So you're going to get that same quality in those ingredients, and of course that traditional process in any Wild Turkey product. So with that said, I'm going to pass it to Meaghan. If you want to give yourself a little intro, let us know where you're coming from and what we're going to talk about today.
Yes. Hi, everybody. And thank you, Benny and Campari community, for having me today. We're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart, which is menus. I do want to acknowledge, of course, that this is a weird time for everybody, and we'll get into QR codes and news in a minute. But I got to go back. So let me start with myself. My name is Meaghan Dorman. I'm the bar director of Rain's Law Room and Dear Irving. And both of those bars are located in New York City, kind of on either side of Union Square. And then they both have sister hotel versions in Midtown, kind of opposite they go. So we're kind of in four corners of Manhattan. And Rain's opened in 2009, Dear Irving 2014, Rain's Law Room at the William 2014, and Dear Irving on Hudson 2019. So I have had some time over the years to make some mistakes with menus, make some really good menus, learn what works in different spaces, and how to express what we want the bar's personality and philosophy to be, kind of in its physical form, which is the menu. That's what we're going to talk about today.
Awesome. So I know we've got some slides, so we can get into those. And while we're getting started, I just want to remind folks watching on Facebook and YouTube, if you guys have any questions, just put them in the comments there, and we'll be able to address those as we go. All right.
Yeah,
back to
definitely
you.
love to answer some questions. Not too much heavy reading. I actually just have some notes to keep us going, really. So what I wanted to start with was the DNA of the space, and how, I've had to think about the menu in terms of where it's going and how people are using it, and how does it kind of fit this thing that we built. And sometimes as a bartender, you have a lot of influence over that, and sometimes you don't. But I do think it's something to keep in the back of your head that even if it's not an opportunity right now, that as you progress in your career, you'll have more control and more influence over what people buy or what's ordered for the bar. And that's definitely been the case with me. At Rain's Law Room, at first we had these beautiful book menus, which went into the idea of like it's this underground kind of library apartment looking thing. They were all handmade, which, surprise, ended up being my job as well to hand make the menus. And they all kind of went missing after a while. So we had to, I don't want to take down my whole setup, but so example number one, Rain's Law Room, kind of like leather bound book for our library setup. We have like this typewriter font, to go with this kind of definitely older. And so that really fits for that. But we definitely made some mistakes in just like the physical form of the menu over the years. And then as we expanded, the other things I had to think about are the kind of the vibe of the place, but also how they're being used. So the other examples I have are from Dear Irving. And Dear Irving, if people are not in New York City, Irving Place is like this magical little street that for a long time all these writers lived on. And actually there is The Gift of the Magi was written in this building, and we have a historical plaque. So the idea of Dear Irving was like our letter, our kind of written thing to the neighborhood. Like, we love you, come in, have some drinks. So the menu is very, like there's a lot of kind of handwritten elements to it in the graphic design. Like, we're kind of giving our insight on these drinks. Like, if someone asked you about the Xantolo, you might say like, oh, red chili, it's spicy and the perfect match for pineapple and agave, something like that. So the vibe, we really tried to match like the idea of the place with the menu. And then my favorite little thing we did was we made these postcards, again, to kind of say like, put some of Dear Irving out in the universe, like these writers were doing on Irving Place for so long. So it's kind of like Mad Libs. I always tell people it's more fun after a couple cocktails, but we mail them for people, and you can like put your little words out to somebody you were thinking about. And then when we opened Dear Irving on Hudson, which is in Midtown, it's in a hotel on 40th and 8th. So right by Times Square, Theater District. It's a busy place by a lot of like transportation hubs. So what's different about that space, about the actual physical space, is people are coming in a lot of times for a different reason. Maybe they're just staying in the hotel and they want to grab a quick drink before they go out, or they're like on this timeline to go see a show. They just want to catch the sunset because we're on the 40th floor. It's this beautiful thing. The turn time is definitely a little bit less than the other bars. So we wanted to keep that in mind with the menu, make it quick and easy. But also we have like all these drink rails around all the big windows. So like we had to do a tall, skinny menu to actually like sit on these rails and be useful for people instead of having these big books that actually wouldn't fit. And just the setup wise, we want to keep some of the DNA with the downtown location. So same kind of handwriting, kind of letter form, kind of we wanted to feel like a speaking voice, kind of written down how we would tell people about drinks. But the menu is a little smaller, and it's meant to just be less options, less kind of things to go through, because where people kind of know where they're going. They made these plans. A lot of cases in the hotel, they're popping up for a drink, or they might not even know about hotel location. So we had to make it like a little faster, a little easier. We had to be able to put more menus out. Have to have a lot of these because it's not as like formally seated as the other bars. If that kind of makes sense about just where they're going to be. And that kind of goes into my other point of like the fonts, the flair. As I've kind of been able to wrap my head around like what is the philosophy or the personality of our bars, we had to think about how are we presenting it to people, which definitely wasn't the case when we opened Rain's. But as we saw who was coming in and how they were reacting to it and what drinks were popular and things like that, that's when we have kind of refocused a few times to think about how we present the drinks, like how many menus do we even have? How much do they cost? Because they tend to walk away. What's the design? And how are people coming in? So a good point. I love it. Underground layer on 17th. Get in. It's very dark and candlelit, which is fun. It's great for a date. It's fun to like catch up with. But you're coming in a first date and you don't know who you're meeting. You know, there's a lot of online dating. It can be a little bit intimidating. For sure. You don't even necessarily know who you're meeting or where they're coming from. So this little story, it tells you in the law that this little speakeasy named after, but also I found gives something people to like focus on and a conversation point for when they're, you know, they've had something to kind of entertain themselves, something to read, something to hold on to physically, which is comforting. And then they can kind of say like, oh, you know, look at this little prohibition law, which I think is always fun for people to talk about how New Yorkers found a way to drink through prohibition, right? So that's those little menus that the
Yeah.
other shout out that I wanted to give was to Nightcap, because I think we probably all saw that Night is not coming back, and they were so great at like, what is the philosophy of the bar and how are we putting it on this menu? This disco collaborative vibe. So I know that this is a tough time for all of us, but although it's a little emotional, like thinking back of our bars and what other bars have done to like say expressing it to you, which so often is just through the menu.
Yeah. I really like a lot of the things you.
Did you ever get to go to Nightcap, Benny, while you were here?
I didn't. It's very unfortunate. In all my travels in the last couple of years, I've only really been to New York a handful of times. I have actually been to Deer Irving on Hudson, though. It was pretty awesome, which kind of makes me think about like a couple of things you pointed out already. You know,
Awesome.
like the DNA of the space being so important, like not only within the four walls of the space, but the neighborhood that you're in, you know, the reasons people might be in that area already, you know, help you anticipate, like you mentioned, you know, Deer Irving on Hudson. Like, in fact, when I came, it was just for a quick drink at the hotel, you know, and then we had another place to be. So the way that you played into that element and, you know, curate the menus by kind of shortening them, maybe less cocktails, also the layout of the physical menu itself, the design being more space friendly. Like these are all things that are really important to consider in the beginning. Did you hear me there, Meaghan?
Yeah, and I think you know, I think everyone's probably yeah, I got you. Maybe we're just on a little delay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Cool. Yeah, so I know people are reimagining their menus right now. Okay, great. So people are definitely reimagining their menus and maybe, you know, thinking about how their career is going to change or how their venue is going to change. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. Or I know people are always plotting and planning their own bars. So it's really fun to just imagine how you would express what you want to be in the format that you're going to present it, you know, now online a lot of the times, but also like in your actual menu, and how that can change. And it forces you to actually verbalize your philosophy, because, you know, we love to, it's hard for me for sure. And once we started doing PR for the bars, that was another force of like, what do I think? How would I word it? What do I want to say? Like, well, you know, you really have to something to say that and what you're going to say. So I can a second, but I can move our next slide if that's possible. Yes, just the next one. Excellent. So when I am designing menus, the one on the left, or my left that I'm looking at, is Ode to the Empire State. That is from Deer Irving on Hudson. The other one that says with a hint of spice is from Rain's Law Room. So even there, that's an example of like the little fonts, how we describe things, kind of what information we give and what we don't. And the reason I did that, and I've done it a couple different ways over the years, is because I like to encourage conversation between either the bartender and the guest or the server and the guest, and while at the same time answering a lot of questions, right? Because what you have to think about when you're serving or running a business is that you want people to come in and order and like start their tabs and start this process, and you want to be able to like, sell some drinks and do a little bit of volume. So you both want to answer questions for people so they can kind of get through the menu and pick what they want. But definitely, especially in our bars, which is pretty like high touch situation, like we want to have those conversation points. So as you can see, for example, the Balto Old Fashioned, it tells you exactly what's in it and like a little kind of description about the drink, how we would kind of describe how it tastes to people. It doesn't say, for example, like what glass it comes in or if it has ice. If you know about an old fashioned, you might assume, but if that's new to you, you wouldn't. Like, for example, the vice versa, you kind of read that has kava, but it doesn't say like exactly the glass or ice and things like that. Whereas on the other page, so that's a conversation point, right, for the bartender or server. If people are deciding between two things, a lot of times they can say, oh, well, this one is over crushed ice. It's a little more cold and tropical, or this one's going to be spirit forward, one big piece of ice, if that sways you. And usually people will feel a way about either side, right? And then at Rain's Law Room, we do have more about the actual serve, but we don't have as many like descriptive words. So that's where the conversation points come in at Rain's. People can kind of see what's in it and know how it's going to be served, but they might have an extra question about like exactly how spicy is it? Or if I'm going between the 10-gallon hat and the Mama Lou's, like, can you tell me the difference? And then the bartender would be able to say the 10-gallon hat is more spice, more like that underground kind of mezcal smoke, a little bit of barbecue, whereas the other one is more of a jalapeno, green, fresh citrus. It's slightly more sour, that cocktail, if that helps you decide. And at that point, the guests would probably have a direction that they want to go in. So I definitely like to think about that balance of giving people a lot of information so they can maneuver on their own, pick a drink, keep it moving, but also like having these conversation points for the servers and bartenders to know how to help manage like between decisions, if people have a couple things in mind. Also, we use Evernote as our kind of app as where all the recipes are. And in that as well, we usually have a little bit more about a description, a little bit more about like a specific spirit, especially if it's something people aren't familiar with, that the bartender or server could review every so often, these conversation points, and make sure that they have more to add, because you just don't want to regurgitate the menu to someone. Obviously they're reading it, but you do want to have a couple more points to bring up if people are having a hard time deciding or going between kind of two drinks. So that's cool. That's an example of how I like to set that up. And
so
yeah.
Question about that, just out of curiosity, how did you decide, obviously this is for two different venues, but how did you decide what information to include, like those extra little breadcrumbs of detail, and then the stuff that you purposely left out? So like obviously on the left, you included a little more of like a flavor profile.
So at Rain's Law Room, it's definitely been around longer. It has yeah. So at Rain's Room, it's been open a little longer. We have a lot of regular guests, but they also tend to be a little more like cocktail savvy or adventurous when it comes to drinks. So I think they kind of like the mystery, or they kind of know a lot themselves, right? They don't need as much guidance per se. They're a little bit, also they like to take a leap and not necessarily know what they're getting. And they're kind of often surprised, like, oh, that's my drink. Didn't really have an idea how it would look, but that we can be more confident that they're excited about that versus scared of it at Rain's Law Room. The Ode to the Empire State, that's from Dear Irving on Hudson. So I should also mention that has a lot of international travel as well. So for us, it was important to put like as much forward, even like one menu has brands and one doesn't, like as much information to people to make it a little more clear. But also, like, for example, the Ode to the Empire State, we get it's Times Square, it's a lot of international travel, but we wanted to add this extra layer of like a New York experience, something a little more organic. So we specifically sourced more local spirits at that venue than we have at the others. So that's like another conversation point for us. Yes, they're probably not familiar with it, but we can kind of say, oh, it's made just a couple miles away in Brooklyn. Are you going to go to Brooklyn while you're here? You can visit the distillery, things like that. But we also wanted to be more descriptive in terms of how things will taste to kind of guarantee people were getting what they were after, because I wouldn't say they're always as adventurous as people going to a law room, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean, I think in both these venues, with the differences aside, they're both still like elegant cocktail focused where you have room for a conversation, like you're able to spend a little time at each table and speak to the guests and encourage these conversations like we're talking about. Are there any other like tips you would give for the other side of things, I guess? Like if it is a little more high volume and you just need people to be able to almost make their own decisions as soon as they look at the menu, what are some of the things you would maybe implement in a menu like that?
So I've definitely seen like little specials or bookmarks that people have made that I think are great, especially when you kind of label things as like we have a page that's staff favorites, and that it kind of says like, we love this, like we stand by it. So I think little pull out things that can make people more confident are always great, like things we love and stand by. I also love to play in like more in a conversation style, but like just the trust that people should have in their bartender or server. And sometimes I just say, is there anything you really dislike? And I play it that way, how to help them pick a drink, so that, okay, we'll definitely like make sure you don't get something that you dislike or you're allergic to, but otherwise we really stand by everything on this menu so we can, find something. Sometimes when it's a fast situation, I find it more easy to like just take out what you don't want and kind of make sure I can give you something that you're happy with that way, instead of when people talk about what they like, sometimes it's everything. So it doesn't save you the time that you might think it would when you're having that conversation.
Yeah, it's easier to
but
ask.
that also
what
goes
are you
into my
to?
next point, if we can.
Yeah.
Luckily, I can drink everything. Yes, so that is a big point of training for the menu, which I think is super important, but also sometimes overlooked, especially by people like me that can get so in their head about the menu and what's going on it. And, I'm looking at it a million times on my computer and trying to spell check it and work on the graphic design and things like that, that you can really easily get behind on the amount of time you're giving to your staff to get familiar with, set up tastings for it, really understand the specs, but also like those other details of like, is it a new spirit that we haven't stocked before? And am I giving people the information to be able to explain it? I use Evernote for a lot of that to like, of course we put the spec in and the serve, but also like where the name came from, or that came up with it, or was it from a book? Is it a classic that we love? But especially if it's like a newer product that both the staff, but also maybe the guest isn't familiar with, we want people to be able to explain that table side. And especially like so much of our staff and myself have done all the roles that I really try to get away from that. Like, well, I'll just talk to the bartender. Like, I want everybody to know, I want everyone to have the information. So everybody is on Evernote. They have all that. They have all the sub recipes so that they know exactly what's in a syrup, or like some kind of infusion, something like that. So it's really for the whole staff, the hosts, the managers. They all do the tastings. They all have like a favorite drink that they know to talk about at the door. Because another thing is I don't know if we will again, but we often had a wait list at Dear Irving and Rain's Law Room, right? So that's a point for the host or the manager to talk to people that are waiting, that are putting their name down, that are excited to like start building up the experience of what they might want to have when they come in the door. So it's really important that everybody has access to that information, first of all. So that's my job, to give it to them. to make it as accessible as possible, because I can't hold people responsible for information that I don't give them. And to make sure like we're all tasting things, we all have the same access to the education to like just build this thing up, to be able to like really present it well, to really know the words to sell it, to help the guests manage it, to feel excited about it, to like build things up, especially if someone did wait 2 hours to come in here on their birthday and then they're coming back. Like, we really want it to be as best as possible, and that's not just the actual thing that comes in the drink. So that's a big part of, I feel like, things that are really important for the whole staff. And if you're a bar manager or a head bartender, something to keep in mind that a lot of times we work solo on these things so long, but we don't give our whole team either enough information or enough time to process the changes that we're making.
Oh, looks like you froze a little bit there. But I think she's making a lot of good points about cross-training the staff, making sure that everybody from the front door to the servers kind of know enough about the menu to have some talking points, especially if you're going to have a wait list like that. I know that was really important at a few of the bars that I worked at. We always made sure our hosts and hostess and everybody knew a little bit, just to be able to talk about it, just to be able to explain a concept. At one place I worked, it was like we almost had 3 different concepts under one roof, where the roof was literally that, like a terrace outdoor space, a little more casual. The main dining area was a big whiskey bar, and then of course it had to have a little basement speakeasy. So you essentially had these 3 concepts in one establishment, and different menus on each floor as well. So curating obviously became super important there. And then, training everybody, making sure everybody kind of could explain. And we also thought it was important to even let everybody contribute. So even, if you're new, we will take ideas, help you mold them, and create kind of like unity in the cocktail. So I kind of just went off on a little side note, reiterating what you were just speaking about, on how everybody should know, the menu from the front door to the back, where to the point at one bar where I was at, we would let anybody even contribute cocktail ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously someone comes in, they're like 21 and they're starting as a busser or a barback. They're welcome to contribute. We're going to help them mold that idea, give them some feeling of ownership to be a part of the whole thing. Because I also can go a long way, and having people know, be able to try the different cocktails and have their favorites, to be able to speak to guests as well and not be caught off guard, is super important.
Yeah, and when we're actually thinking about, like, we're kind of putting the word out that we're going to start working on another menu, the first thing we do is ask, and we do a ton of table service, more so than we have bar seats. We talk to the people on the floor. What are people asking for that we don't have a great answer to right now? Which right now is spicy drinks. You can't make enough spicy drinks. But what are people asking for that we sometimes don't have a great answer to? What gets returned because people didn't understand something about it? Like, we have to pull that data from the people that are working here. Like, they have the information because, they're doing so much face-to-face service. So of course I rely on like the POS and what sells, but also the reaction that people have. Like, what do they really love? What do they come back for? What, when you go to a bar and you're like, I've been dreaming about this Gibson. Like, that's what I want to know, because it helps me like craft the next menu. And we want people's, opinions. What do people love? What goes over really well? So yes, we can keep that drink around, but we can kind of play on that theme or ingredient that's really popular right now.
Yeah.
So actually that goes into my next kind of portion about training for a menu. If I can put my second, yes, exactly. So something I found out, of course, by a couple mistakes, as usual, is the other thing that I have to train for when I'm training people on the menu is, especially when we're like getting newer people to cocktail places, like that maybe came from restaurants or hotels and don't know as many of the ingredients, The tasting and education is really important so that they can help the guest on their journey, because we have to pull out, like, what are people trying to say that they like that maybe they don't have the words for? That's our job, to have the words and the expertise for like what flavors people really like. So to help people do that. And of course, we want people to stay for a few drinks. Like for us, we do much better if we're not turning tables all the time, but we have people stay for a few rounds. So that's what we definitely want to encourage. So on some of our earlier menus at Dear Irving, what I did was purposely had a drink that related to another drink somewhere on the menu. So if people were talking to their server or bartender for their second round and they had the vice versa, they really liked it, but, oh, I don't want to be boring, I don't want to get the exact same thing. Oh, well, you can go to the Santa Rosa. It's still going to have that floral element that you probably liked about the first one. What's slightly different about it? This one is pisco based, things like that. So to help people, like, get people to stay, help people on their journey, and learn more about why do things relate to each other. And if somebody didn't like something, okay, we definitely don't want to offer them something similar, because we're going to run into this same issue, right? But if people, like, say, had Art Gibson, which is like a little more savory riff on the very classic. So we kind of know that they're happy with a spirit forward drink. They're happy with something kind of stirred. It has a very savory element. Oh, and if someone that likes gin might be interested in trying Aquavit, are you familiar with it? It has a little more like caraway than juniper, but it still has like really intense, bold flavor. It's one that we're really proud of. You know, we try to really set things up with both the wording and the education to back it up, that we can really sell these drinks and take the guest on a journey from the menu. So it was important to me to have people know how drinks would relate to each other, so that if people are coming back, and I find a lot of times that on their second drink, you know, sometimes people are just like coming in from work. You don't really know what they're doing. They just want to like sit down and have something familiar or approachable. But like after they've been with their friends for a minute and they've loosened up and they've had a drink, then maybe they want to talk to you more about the menu, or then maybe they want to be more adventurous, and you're kind of ready with the information you pulled from what they like, from what they ordered on the first round, to kind of move them into that second round of drinks. So how things are. And for us, like, it's very important for us that there's a lot of variety, that there's something for everybody. I know some bars and restaurants have like a very specific focus, you know, like tequila and mezcal or Italian food. But like for us, it's definitely ambiance is kind of our thing. And people are coming in for all different reasons. Dates, like client meetings, because they know it's like a quiet vibe where they can talk. People from out of town love to show it off. So a lot of times people coming into Rain's Law Room or Dear Irving don't even necessarily know where they're going. They just said, like, my brother told me I had to meet him here at 7:00. And they're like, I have no idea what I'm walking into. So we, you know, it's our job to kind of like make them comfortable, but we have to have a big variety. Like, I personally don't want to have like just a spirit specialty or a type of drink we make. You know, I want someone that's coming in like for a work meeting to be able to get something kind of low alcohol or a good wine, if they don't want to have like a very spirit forward drink in a meeting. But you know, we're near like Union Square Cafe and 11 Madison Park. If people want to come have a nice, elegant nightcap after dinner, we have that. If, you know, you're bouncing around and you're going to a few bars, like, we want to talk to you about where you're at in the night and offer you something, and all kinds of flavors, all kinds of spirits from around the world. So for me, variety is very important to our menu and to what we offer to people, because we don't always know why or where they're coming from, but we're happy that they're there for sure.
Absolutely. And I mean, I really like, and it kind of goes back into the training portion as well, but I really like of having a progression pre-planned or predetermined for your staff, just like having them knowing like what their favorites are and being able to speak to those, you know, having them being able to recommend, whether it is another menu cocktail or a classic cocktail, something that's going to be in that same vein of the first one they had, or something different if they want to switch it up, go in another direction. Having everybody like educated on drinks, ingredients, you know, all the modifiers, and knowing, you know, what the flavor of each thing is and how it works together to then be able to progress forward and recommend different cocktails. It's very important. I don't think many people necessarily think about that step when they're creating the menu. So it's really cool you pointed that out.
Yeah. And, honestly, that came about from when we opened Dear Irving and we're training a whole new staff. Like, if you've been at one place for years and years, it's easy to um, not remember what it's like to start at a new place or see a new menu. But, when I was working with new people again, it was like, oh, well, if they asked me this, what would I do? And it was like, so I have to walk through all these situations to then kind of be able to explain it to everybody else and tell people like, oh, this is how we would do it. So
Yeah.
opening Dear Irving was great exercise in menu and menu training for me, for sure. So now I think, of course, we have to talk about like where we're at right now and what we're doing. So we can go to my last slide, which is all about to go and reopening, which we are opening tomorrow actually. So I don't have like a ton of information on what it's been like for us, but we are sure preparing. And I have one other little example. So we have been doing a little bit of to go from Dear Irving Gramercy. This is the other example I have, which is just our little postcard. And this is just a funny explanation because we're putting this together. Of course, like we don't really have a staff. People are spread out. And what we wanted to do is a few stir drinks, which were easy to batch, and it wouldn't matter necessarily how many we sold, how much we're wasting, or not to waste anything. And then our two most popular drinks, which was a Santolo and Whiskey Business, both kind of like on the spicy sour side. So we're putting this together. We feel pretty good about it, but there's one drink that we don't have a photo of. And of course, like we can't do that right now. So we had to go the illustrated route to do that. So that was just a funny story of how sometimes you just have to work with what you got. And if you can't do this great photography or really do a whole menu right now, you can find a computer program to illustrate your drinks for you. So we did a little bit of to go, and like I was saying, we kind of went off two things: the POS data of what really was selling well, what we think people would want to buy. We kind of focused on like bottles and larger format, like people going away for the weekend or not wanting to go out much during the week and sell kind of like 2 to 3 servings or 5 to 6 servings. So stir drinks that we could batch that would stay stable. And then if we were going to order some citrus and perishables, make sure they were our most popular drinks that are going to sell pretty well. So that worked out. I wouldn't say it was like crazy busy, but it was good. It was good to like get our feet wet again and see some people in the neighborhood and be able to talk to them about reopening. So for our menu that we will launch tomorrow, what I had to do, which of course we're doing QR codes, which I think almost everybody is. We will have some just disposable paper menus if people have an issue or their phone isn't working well. But we had to think about two main things, which is our staff. We're opening at 25%. We have a smaller staff. We also, of course, just have to be super careful on costs right now because we've been closed for almost 7 months. So I had to look at a few things. What was selling really well, what was really popular when we closed, what in terms of labor, like how many juices are we making, how many syrups are we making, like what days are people going to be here, what can we do in that kind of hour before service. But then also there was this like employee side of it and us coming back and like, of course, everyone being like half excited and half scared. But when we closed in March, we had like just finished or / put out our spring menus, which is a big collaborative process. Everybody's like so excited and they're so proud of it. And it was like, close up shop, go home. So I had to go back through the menus and see, even though now we're in a different season, I really wanted to retain as much that we had worked on as possible for the staff to, I didn't want to overwhelm them with like a brand new menu, like coming back from not really working. Maybe it would have been exciting for guests, but it would be very hard on us. But I did want to keep some of the things that we had just worked on together that like people were super proud of. Like as a morale boost, as like, this was really exciting. Hopefully we can get like a little bit of that juju back as we go back. At Rain's Law Room, we had just done this whole, actually fun thing. Wild Turkey is definitely on there about, Manhattans and Manhattan variations, like being in New York, being this kind of like underground speakeasy. So we had our favorite classic at Manhattan and then a few variations for little Empire State Love. And then this is from Dear Irving. So Deer Irving Gramercy, we have pretty oops, missed my page. So we have a lot of bartenders from Central America here. So what we did is we went back and thought about like drinks and spirits they love from Ecuador, Venezuela, Peru, Guatemala, those either flavors or spirits or things like that they love that they wanted to kind of put in a drink and express in kind of like this New York take on where they're from. And they're coming back to work. So I wanted to keep this on the menu. At Deer Irving, we had just done this deep dive into female-made spirits and ingredients. So that was like a big thing that the staff there was excited about. So I wanted to keep as many of those as possible, aligning on like, yes, a smaller menu, like very specific prep and hours for people as we like get our toes wet, we get back in the swing of things. And then of course, hopefully we can expand eventually, but definitely had to keep it like execution with a small staff was like the biggest focus of our menus coming back.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, everyone was just trained up on this menu and then it gets cut short. But not only that, just coming back with all the other regulations for safety right now, it would just be so much. So it really is important to consider, obviously your staff's well-being, all the safety precautions being number one, and then, working with them on cocktails or cocktails they had already created to just make it a little more seamless for at least once you guys get open, because there's going to be like other little bumps in the road and little hiccups that you're going to have to work through just in ways of working and steps of service. So definitely consider that, I would say, for folks watching, getting ready to reopen indoors, outdoors, whatever it is, consider your employees, their happiness, and not necessarily overwhelming them right away would probably be a good thing.
Yes, for sure. And like, so much of it is so stressful and unknown, but you know how it is. You spend a lot of time behind the bar when you make like some of those classics or things that you're, okay, like this motion feels good. I know how to do this. I can make the syrup, no problem. Everything else, yeah, we're going to figure it out as it goes along.
Cool. So we're getting a couple questions through from the comments on Facebook now. One of them says, how are the QR codes set up? So, I mean, just for anybody else watching, it may not be familiar with the QR codes. They're like just those barcodes that you can scan. I've experienced them when I've gone out to some restaurants for outdoor seating, and it's really, really awesome. I mean, you literally just open up the camera on your phone, hold it up to the code, and it'll take you to the website or the PDF or whatever format the menu is on. And I mean, I think that this could very well be something that just sticks around in general, because it's really cool. It's really convenient. It's obviously saving paper, which is good for the earth. So yeah, what's like the easiest way to get a QR code set up?
That is a great question, because it was not my actual job, but I know that we use Squarespace. And we've done it through them. So yeah, we have a smaller menu that we make into a PDF, and then we upload it through Squarespace. And when they click the actual QR code that, we printed out, we put in these little plastic holders so that we can clean those and replace them as needed. Yes, it would just take them right to the little site, and they can scroll through what we have on their own, which, I was going to bring up. I think as much as this has been stressful and we all kind of hope we can get back to like some kind of normal service, there's going to be some things that stick around that we've learned. And I definitely think that this is one of them. In our bars, especially, they were, kind of speakeasy, escapey, and we kind of would pretend that people don't have phones when everybody has phones, and we can like acknowledge that and use that to our purpose. And hopefully I get to make a nice book or something one day. But even when people are, maybe they're outside waiting, or they come by in the afternoon when you're not open, if they can just kind of check out your menu easily, I think the more access, the better.
Yeah. So in line with that same question, I don't know, because you said you're just opening. Were any of your spots open for outdoor service before this?
No, we didn't have, we don't really have the space, or we're not in the right setup. It wasn't really available to everybody. So yeah, we were doing to go out of one location that was better set up for it, but otherwise we've just been closed. So tomorrow is the big day.
Yeah. Somebody did ask, are customers pretty familiar with the menu format now and like how to use the QR codes? And I mean, I don't know if we can speak to that from experience, but I know my visits out to restaurants and bars, like it seems like everybody gets it. It's pretty easy. Like I said, I mean, you literally just use the camera on your phone. You don't even have to download a special app to scan the code.
Yeah, and I can only speak for New York, but New York, it's everywhere. That's like we're gonna have some paper, like one use if we really need to, but some places don't have, like, it's kind of that, or I'm not sure what else. It's kind of the only option that I've seen in a lot of places. So I think people, yeah, are familiar. The other thing you probably will have to think about as people, right now everybody's kind of here that's here, but as people like travel or more internationally, again, like having the Wi-Fi available will probably be important with that QR code setup. If people for some reason maybe can't access it or get to the website, but that's the only hiccup I've really seen.
Yeah. So a lot more questions about the digital menus. Somebody is wondering, are there considerations you have to make for the digital menus themselves, like formatting or, anything like that?
So the things that we've really thought about, Squarespace is very good at adapting things for mobile so that we didn't have to do that per se. We've printed it in various sizes just to test it on our phones and make sure it works, because I do want to make it easy for people to like both see and use just visually in a dark bar. Like, we all know how hard it is sometimes just to read a menu. It could possibly be hard for either a person or their phone possibly to pick up the QR code. So we've tried to test that as much as possible. I think there is a consideration on how much people will look at on their phone or just read versus what you might print, and they might be more interested in that format. So, like, for example, for the most part, we haven't put the spirits list on the menu right now. The good thing is it's easy to adapt, right? If you want to add more, you can. Except at one location, Rainslow and at the William, like, it just always like did more spirit sales. We also have a lot of stock, so we kind of feel like if people don't see it, we won't sell it in a way. But how much are people going to go through and scroll through? So that's been my biggest consideration, is how big of a menu can you actually do for a QR code if you were used to doing like a 30 drink menu. Like, I wouldn't open with that right now, but would I also expect someone to like keep scrolling through when it's not in a fun book they can read? So I think that's been my biggest concern. Something I did think of, which we haven't gotten to yet, but I do think there's more, maybe more ability to like translate menus or make them easier for people to access when we are getting more international travelers again. So that was a point that I think we can explore for the good out of all this too.
Yeah. So I think like maybe the answer to that is probably less is more right now. Again, just like same thing with relaunching. Okay, we got a cat, sorry. Just relaunching your menus in general, not overwhelming your staff, kind of goes in hand with that. Don't necessarily want to overwhelm the guests by having them scan this code and then they have like 4 pages that are smaller and hard to read. If you can get it down to a single page format, and with your most popular cocktails on there at first,
Yeah.
when possible. Of course, if you have lots of spirits and you want to list them because you need to sell them, maybe you can implement having 2 separate QR codes, like that one like straightforward menu and then the one more detailed for the people that really do want to dive in and read all the things you have to offer.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And then another question here, how does your team feel about indoor service? Were there any concerns you had to address?
Yeah, so definitely a lot of concerns. And honestly, like, I feel all different kinds of way about it, depending on the hour of the day. I mean, one thing is that we couldn't bring everybody back right away. So it was very much a conversation with everybody about how comfortable do you feel? Do you need to work right now? Because if if you're really uncomfortable or you have a reason that you can't come back to work, like you can stay on unemployment if you have it, if that's better for you. There are some people that have had issues with unemployment this whole time. So they were like, yes, we're ready. So it was definitely like a one-on-one conversation about how do you feel, like as much as you're comfortable telling us about your situation. And then we're going to try to address that. But for sure, like we wanted to reassure people, like we're following all the rules. Like we have a deep cleaning company. Sorry? So we want to assure people that we're following all the rules, like all the cleaning guidelines, like never leaving them without a manager presence to enforce like the mask rules and the social distancing, but also that like we're all in it together and we really have to see how it goes. And hopefully the people that are excited to come back are on their best behavior, but we are going to address this day by day as we ease back into service.
So actually, Benny might be frozen now. Hi.
Oh, Benny's a little frozen.
Yeah,
Hello.
I show up when things change. Oh, there we go. I mean, we have double the Benny. Even better.
I don't know. How's this happening? The internet. Hello.
The internet.
That's all right. You're back. You're back.
We almost made it all the way through. But I think I dropped out when you were just talking about some of the concerns and just like, figuring out who's able to return, who feels comfortable, who could maybe afford to stay off right now to help others. So was there anything else you added?
Just that we kind of have, so at 25%, it was like a limited staff. So it was basically everybody that was like 100%, I want to come back / I need to work or want to work. And then, we'll kind of have another round when we're at 50% of who else like we need back or who wants to come back. There'll be like that another opportunity, because as I've kind of noticed too, like people, we almost opened in July, but then it got pushed back. So we've already been having these conversations. So like, hopefully and we want to offer, of course, everybody that was here first their job before we look to anybody else. So we can like just keep having these conversations about like, how do you feel? Are you ready? Now there's room. And then safety, like everybody's on board, which I think is really important, that it's just clear that it's like ownership down, that is like, we're following the rules. We're not messing with anybody's health or putting you at risk just to like pack it up or stay open later or make a few extra dollars. Like we're doing this the right way. We're committed to doing that the right way. And like also like open communication. It's always been that way, but like if you see something, say something, speak up. Just because we used to do service this way doesn't mean we have to do it that way. If it doesn't work, you feel uncomfortable, we've moved tables around for the reach, those kind of things to like make people feel as comfortable as possible. Yeah.
Awesome. Was there anything else that you wanted to add about our topic today?
That was I think that was all I had. No, happy to answer questions if there's any, but I got a busy day tomorrow too. So
yeah. Well, I think you did a really awesome job. I mean, thinking about the DNA of the space itself, obviously that's number one, knowing where your establishment is, the neighborhood, the people, right? The demographic, what they want. Within there, then the physical menu itself being super important, the size and shape playing a role in service, the different fonts and flair you can add. Like I love the little takeaway, the postcard idea in there. Those little things you can add like that give someone a memory are always great. And then of course, like things to encourage conversation in a menu or also help, like defer away from questions a little bit. Like if people, you give them the serve of the drink and someone sees right away it's on a big rock, they might be more inclined to order that. Or if they want something shaken and it says that, they know it's citrusy. Having those little tidbits, those little breadcrumbs on your menu can go a long way. That was awesome. And then of course, training. I think that was a big part of this. Like the menus themselves, obviously that's what this is about. Curating it, and then of course adapting it to what we're dealing with now, but the people behind the menu, not only the people creating it, but the people in all different aspects of the bar or restaurant, like having them all tuned in and knowing what's going on really goes a long way. And then, like we said, the adapting, the QR codes, I think that's big. I think that's something that's really going to stick around. Once people get used to these little things, these might be elements that change the way we serve people for forever now, but they might actually improve and help, in certain ways.
Yeah.
So that's pretty awesome. Do you want to shout out maybe your social handles or where people could hit you up if they have any more questions after this?
Yeah, definitely. So I am at Dear Irving and Rain's Law Room. If you are in New York and you feel okay about going out, we'd love to see you, or some takeout drinks. I'm at Ginger Ricky on Instagram. There I am, because of course I had to have a little cocktail fun in there.
Love
and
it.
I have a website, meaghandorman.com, if you just want to see more about what I've done.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Meaghan. This was really great. A couple other things I just want to throw out there to folks tuning in. If you've enjoyed this distance learning, you'll be able to find more content, similar content on different topics at Portland Cocktail Week's Facebook page. You can see the URL there. They're also at PDXCW on Instagram, so you'll know when more things are coming up. Definitely follow and like them on both platforms. There's also an amazing archive, right, of all the classes that have already passed. So not just the new ones coming up, but you can tune in and go check out other stuff. There's definitely some cool topics in there. I'm sure bartenders would want to watch. And if you're not on Facebook, don't fret. They are on YouTube also. So you can check out portlandcocktailweek.com/YouTube to see all the same archive of videos, which is really great. So definitely share that with your friends out there, because I think they may not know. They might think it's only a Facebook thing, and they might not be tuning in, and they could be. So, and of course, lastly, just follow us at Campari Community. We love sponsoring these distance learning classes, and we're going to be doing more through the end of the year. It's really exciting. We're happy to be a part of this. And we've also got our own content coming up, weekly as well. And we have virtual Behind the Barrel. So for all the Wild Turkey fans out there, bourbon fans, whiskey fans, you can check out Behind the Barrel. If you go to my Instagram, at Benny Bourbon 101, I have a link in my profile to Behind the Barrel. So it's a virtual platform this year, but it's open to all industry folks. So definitely hit me up, follow me on IG, and sign up for virtual Behind the Barrel and check us out. But thanks again, Meaghan. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks to all y'all for tuning in. Cheers.